one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Let the minutes reflect that we do have a quorum. We have 4 of our 7 members here. So who's up first?
Who's that first? Or who's the only one?
Well, we don't have any minutes.
No, we don't have minutes because the meeting was 2 days ago. I asked Malin today and she looked at me like, well, not from this past Monday.
No old business, new
Right.
business, public hearing, update of recreational zone improvement plan. Chuck Lehman? Lehman, that must be you.
Thank you. I'm Chuck Lehman with Lehman & Lehman. We're landscape architects and planners out of Mishawaka. We were hired to update the town's recreation impact fee study and related ordinance on that. You should have 2 documents. One is a bound document that is the actual study itself, and then the PowerPoint presentation is the one that's stapled. I'm going to refer basically to the PowerPoint presentation. If there's questions and it's not in the presentation, I can go to the document and we can refer to that then too. So first of all, thank you for accommodating a special meeting. It's not typical. I know that as a plan commission, you meet twice a week, so I appreciate that on this behalf. On slide 2, you'll see part of the state statute requires that a recreation impact fee advisory committee be formed, and the names of the committee is up in the upper left-hand side. The other staff and consultants that participated in that process are also listed on that page, but I wanted to formally thank them for that. Thank the staff, Lisa, and for Will and the details that I had requested that we work through in doing population projections and so on. Slide 3 is the formula to figure impact fees. Basically, the impact fee is determined by the cost of the infrastructure that has been selected on that, minus any non-local revenues, which would be like donations, minus any impact deductions that would be possibly for the financial side. And then that number is then divided by the projected 10-year building permits of the residential growth in that next 10-year period. You'll see how that plays out as we go through. On slide 4, the community level of service, this is an illustration that kind of defines the differences between current deficiencies and then also future needs. If you look at the graphic on the upper left-hand portion where it says current, this would be a snapshot of today. So that would be your current population, your current inventory or your infrastructure, and that's balanced on recreational standards. And this illustration, it shows that you have more population than you have for some of the recreation inventory, and that it creates a wedge of that orange there. That would be an illustration that would demonstrate what a current deficiency would be based on that snapshot. In the future, and the current deficiencies have to be funded outside of impact fees. Impact fees cannot be used for funding current deficiencies. In the future, and again, this is that 10-year growth forecast, you would have more residential development going on. Again, you base that on that same recreational standard. In this case, that growth in the current population would create another offset, and that green wedge in this case would be an illustration for future needs. That future needs is 100% funded by impact fees. So the growth that's caused by the new residential growth, the people moving here, is considered the source of where that impact fee dollar amount would be coming from as far as the source. There's a couple of components that goes into the study. We look at that 10-year growth projection. So obviously we look at your current land use plan, which is illustrated in slide 5. If you go to slide 6, that looked at various parcels of development that would be within the town growth areas, and those would be forecasted and what that forecast population could be. What we did with the town staff is go through each of those areas and recognize that if there was a potential for that growth to occur in each and every one of those parcels, what would be that percentage of growth in that 10-year time period. The slide 7, 8, and 9 really looks at each of those various parcels and did that projection. We also looked at what the development of each of those parcels based on your current density and your current zoning and what that would mean if and when it ever develops to its fruition. Slide 10, we found that majority of those areas were already in the area of either pending developments or existing developments and still had capacity for build-out. Slide 10 illustrates what the listing of those existing developments. You'll see at the very bottom there, that 10-year forecast. There would be a forecast of about 2,000 residential building permits in that 10-year period, and based on a density of 2.78 persons per household, there would be about 5,500 new residents or new population added to that. Slide 11, the next slide is the forecast. We always look at what would be the potential if everything was built out to that capacity, to the zoning and to the zoning density. Based on that, the future town build-out population would be a little over 35,000 people. What we're recognizing in that next 10-year period up to year 2030 would be a growth of 5,527 persons, or an estimated 2030 population of 15,771. The graphic at the bottom on that slide illustrates what that historical growth has been in the blue, and in the forecast in the next 10 years shown in the red bars. So on slide 12, we looked at how that 10-year growth projection would be in that next 10-year period. One thing that the statute requires is that we do a 10-year forecast of population and that growth. But statute also goes on to say that the ordinance that relates to this forecast and this study can only last no more than 5 years. So we do a 10-year growth projection with the idea that in year 4 and 5, we're going to be coming back and doing another 10-year growth projection along that way. So in slide 12, it looks at where that growth would occur. You'll see in 2021, we're showing a 2% growth, and it's basically prorated up so that it capturing the mass of that growth is going to be in those last 5 years. And you'll see that growth shown basically on that slide before with that red columns. But this will capture that 988 building permits, or that 5,527 population, and how that's distributed over this last the coming 10 years. So that focuses on the population forecast. Then we looked at the park infrastructure, which is shown on slide 13. This looks at the existing parks, the area schools, and also other recreational providers. And we capture what is that snapshot of facilities within the community on about 35 different recreational infrastructure components, which are shown on the left-hand side of that table. Looking at just park land, which is slide 14, we looked at there's a little over 170 acres of parkland that makes up the Danville Park system. We looked at the current level of service is 16.3 acres per 1,000 people. What we discussed with the committee was to establish a community level of service standard for the town of 13.5 acres per 1,000 people. This would show that currently we'd have a surplus of about 20, almost 30 acres of land, but with the growth projections, we'd be having a future need of 42.62 acres of future land that would have to be acquired. And again, this illustration on this line item, there wouldn't be any current deficiencies, so there's no need to look for funding for that. The cost of the 42 acres of land would come strictly by impact fees. Of those 35 different items, slide 15, the last time we updated the study, we had two of those components that actually went into the calculations, and those were trails and also the park open space acres. Basically, the committee looked at this along with the park department, and we decided to keep those two, but break the trails down into hard surface trails and then nature pathway trails. So there's actually three components of that. Slides 16 and 17, I won't get into the details, but this goes into the analysis to figure out, is there a current deficiency for those elements which are shown in the bottom three tiers of those lines that are shaded in yellow. And then slide 17 looks at what the actual cost would be for those components. The coming slides actually will have a little bit more. It won't be an eye test to see how small you can read. Actually, I'll go to slide 19 because those focus on those three components. And again, the three components would be the paved trails, the nature pathways trails, and then also the park open space acres. You'll see on slide 19 that the current deficiencies, there's only one element that carries a current deficiency based on the standard, and that was the trails, or the paved trails. And the current deficiency would be $60,741. The future needs, which again is that forecast for the future, would be what would be funded by impact fees. That totals for those three elements of $2.22 million. You take the $2.22 million and divide it by the number of building permits, which was almost the 2,000 building permits. That comes up with a gross impact fee of $1,117. As I said before, the statute states that current deficiencies cannot fund current impact fees cannot fund current deficiencies. That basically those have to be funded outside of impact fees. Slide 20 looks at where that $60,000 would be funded. Working with Will and the park department of the town, we decided that the food and beverage tax would be the funding resource for those current deficiencies, which is basically how many of the trails are being funded now. The analysis on 21, slide 21, and basically indicated that there were no impact deductions. There was nothing that was going to be, because all of this is going to be funded out of food and beverage tax, there was no impact deductions that had to be calculated. So the summary on that, slide 22, looks at what was discussed. Basically, the current deficiencies of $60,741 was going to be funded out of food and beverage tax. The current impact or the future impact cost for that 10-year period of those three line items would be the $2.22 million. That number is then divided by the number of residential building permits, which was 1,988 building permits. That calculation comes up to a projected impact fee of $1,117. Slide 23 looks at some stats on existing municipalities and what their impact fees are. For the ones listed there, that average number is $1,329. We had some discussion because your current impact fee is $789, and this was somewhat of a significant jump on that. We looked at many of these communities around the area. So we looked at Avon, Brownsburg, Plainfield, and Whitestown as four examples. if there was a 3% increase for the cost of construction, which many communities in their impact fee has been adding an adjustment, annual adjustment to their impact fee. If those were added to those 4 communities, that average for current date impact fee dollar amount would be $1,275. I point that out only the mere fact that you could say, well, what is say Avon's, and Avon's right now was originally $1,095. But again, that was 4 or 5 years ago. So that annual cost of adjustment for the cost of construction would have been added to that to get that more current data or dollar amount. So slide 24 is the summary on that. We looked at basically one impact zone. The cost or the elements that we looked at of that 35 components, we looked at those 3 A priorities, which were the trails and also the land. The future deficiencies to be fulfilled in the next 10 years is $60,741. Future needs, which would be funded by impact fees, would be $2.22 million. The determined impact fee dollar amount would be the $1,117. It is recommended that there be an annual adjustment for cost of construction of 3% per year, and that the reporting of the revenue and expenditures of the impact fee fund would be part of the town's Park and Recreation annual report that is given. So that's a quick overview of the study and the recommendations. What questions may you have at this point?
I have one question. So like, this is a 5-year program with a 10-year. So if we don't meet these current or future needs, do those become current deficiencies in that next 5 years? So therefore, if we don't meet these numbers and we don't complete those, do those become a current deficiency?
It will be determined by when you do the calculations then, too.
Okay.
So in some communities, they've, one of the issues that the statute would be much easier if you would zero out your current fund at the time each year, time the ordinance is updated. But that's not part of the ordinance. So basically, many communities carry that over. In some cases, they have applied that money that they had been retained that may go back several years, which was collected on a future need that current day is that they're actually a deficiency, and they could use that for funding that current deficiency at that time.
Because
Good
obviously, if
observation.
we don't build this many homes, then that has an effect on being able to build those current deficiencies or future deficiencies if they become current deficiencies.
And they become, I mean, what we're projecting 2,000 building permits, if you only do 1,000 building permits, and again, this is over a 10-year period, so, to say that that's really fallen short, you may need to look at 500 building permits in the next 10 years or next 5 years or something to that extent too.
So that'll change.
The advantage is, and that's one reason why our projections that we have, it's not a straight line that we're going to, it kind of curves like this here. So the idea is that we're going to be conservative in the next 4 years and then really be aggressive in the last 5 or 6 years.
So, and have you found that 3% is enough for the cost of construction each year?
Possibly. The cost of plywood today is
So
much.
that's why I asked, because we know the cost right now is just unpredictable.
It is.
It's tripling and quadrupling.
Yeah, and if you know the percentage that we should be using, we ought to invest it in the money market right now. But it is one that many communities who have an annual adjustment's been using that 3% dollar amount to factor that in. And again, keep in mind that we're talking in terms of a decade, that 10 years, but you're going to be updating this again in 4 years. And with that update, those adjustments can be made then too.
Along with that, Barry, is some of the philosophy in that with the committee was if we do that 3%, then we won't be going from 700 to 1,100.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They'll be able to plan for it a little bit better if they know it's only going to have 3% growth. And then the next time we do it, if we follow the same 3%, it'll be predictable.
Okay.
So would that 3%, would that be using the current impact fee, or are we starting at 1,100?
It would be starting at 11, because
Okay,
that
that's what I
ordinance will
thought.
die off. This would be
Yeah.
the new one that you would be
Gotcha.
applying.
That's what I
The,
thought.
the previous ordinance did not have an annual adjustment.
Okay,
in that.
very good.
So that's part of the recommendations that we're.
So when a builder comes in to get a permit, he has to pay that sewer impact fee
He-
and the acreage fee and this fee, which I assume is added to the price of the lot that the buyer is going to pay for it.
It's captured at the time when the building permits are collected, yes.
The committee is built with a builder, developer, real estate agent, so that they are aware and can, pass the word on. It's pretty standard, though.
So this would go also, somebody has an empty lot here in town that build his own house.
Yes, correct.
Same thing.
Yep.
Doesn't apply to renovation or I'm going to do an addition.
Just regular sales. It's only new homes.
So Tommy, the development fee is done at the time of development. That's not part of the
That
building
acreage
permit.
fee,
Yeah, that's not in the building permit. That's a cost directly to the developer.
just
Not the
water-
home buyer.
Just the water and sewer.
Yeah, park impact in the water and sewer tap.
Want to be sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, this is a public hearing, so I will open it to the public if anybody has anything. If you do, please come up to the mic and give your name and address and say what you have to say. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing portion of the meeting. It's my understanding our duty is to forward a favorable, unfavorable, or no action to the town council, correct?
That is correct.
All right, folks. Entertain a motion.
President, I move we forward a favorable recommendation, update recreational zone improvement.
Okay, we have a motion to send a favorable recommendation to the town council. Do I hear a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Barry, roll call.
Mr. Harvey?
Aye.
Mr. Thompson? Ms. Howard?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Just to be clear, want to make sure that motion includes the 3% increase per year? Okay.
This will go to the council next Wednesday, which is the 19th, I believe.
Do you have anything else
No, I do not.
this time?
Nope.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?